Before we start, a small disclaimer. Marc is participating in this podcast episode in a personal capacity and not as a representative of Salesforce. His views are his own and does not imply an endorsement for any product or service on behalf of Salesforce.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I am joined today by Marc Engall. He's an account exec at Salesforce. And we've been working with Marc a little while. And I said to him, you should come on the podcast because whilst being at Salesforce, he has lots of other interesting things going on. So Marc, thank you for coming on.
You're welcome. Nice to be here. Thank you.
And in usual Dean fashion, there is absolutely no script. So he has no idea what I'm going to say, no idea what I'm going to ask him. And I've said to him, if we make a mistake, we're just going to keep going. So you're very brave, Marc.
Brave or slightly stupid, but maybe a bit of both, yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what you do at Salesforce and how you got into kind of sales.
Okay, so I'm an account exec at Salesforce, and I've been there about 18 months. And I look after the London region for the NHS. So it's only NHS that I deal with. It's about 145 trusts, about 500,000 people, and about 31 billion going on in that marketplace. So it's quite a buoyant marketplace. I've been in the NHS business for about 12 years, something like that. So when Salesforce and I had a chat, it seemed like a great idea. I love what Salesforce are doing, and it can really change the face of the way that healthcare is delivered in the whole of the NHS, actually. So I really believe in it. I got into selling, like a lot of people do, by accident, completely by accident. I went along for a marketing role, and they said, "Here's a phone, here's a book, here's the yellow pages. You're renting Macintosh computers back in the 90s." And I didn't know what to say. I was too polite to say no thanks, and here I am, sort of 26 years later. But I think the thing that kept me in it was I didn't find it as hard as the next person. I wasn't good at it, but I just didn't find it as hard. I mean, they were literally eating their hearts out every day. They couldn't do it, and I just found it really quite simple. Very, very straightforward. So, and that's the way I've sort of, kind of pegged myself in my career, is sort of, just not being fantastic, but just finding it easier and finding easier ways to do things, and almost smarter, not harder, really. So
what's your take on how sales has changed since, whether we say since the internet, but at least in the last few years? What's changed in sales that you've seen?
So it's dramatically changed. So one of the reasons for writing the book was that sales training is far lower on the agenda of a lot of companies now. It's very much, well, we've built all these tools, go and use them. So sales training isn't what it was. I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is it's very much more down to the individual. So it's down to the individual salesperson to kind of, because there's so many more self-service tools out there, like LinkedIn Navigator and all that sort of good stuff. The organization, especially big organizations, are expecting you to be your own sort of franchise, and a lot more of the work is down to you rather than the big corporates, rather than the big corporate organizations. So the inbound leads are leads that you create. The pre-sales narrative is one that you create along with your pre-sales guys. So it's very much more down to you. I would say that's how it's changed.
And we're going to come to your book and your motivation to write the book, because I know you're passionate about improving sales, and that's like a big thing. But just to talk about LinkedIn, because you mentioned it there a little bit, how do you see LinkedIn fitting into the sales process? What do you, and where do you see that that's going to go in terms of the mix of cold calling, email? How do you see LinkedIn? Because it seems to have, from my perspective, I know I'm biased, it seems like it's taking a bigger slice of the pie in terms of outreach than it's ever done.
Very much so. I mean, you've got the traditional methods of outreach, which is post, which is becoming less and less these days. Although funny enough, these days, if you send a letter, you probably stand out, to be fair, because how many letters do you receive? But email and all the kind of standard electronic interactions that we have with customers, or try to have with customers, they're becoming a bit difficult. One of the reasons is GDPR and the opt-out option. So if you've got a database, let's say it's Salesforce, and you've opted out of receiving any commercial emails from that organization, that lead is dead to you. You can't use it. You can't send any commercial emails. So that's a diminishing pot, because if you keep sending emails to these people, and eventually they're going to get upset with you, and they're going to go, no, unsubscribe, thank you very much. And the law says when you unsubscribe, you can't send any more of that, or you shouldn't send any more of those emails. There's penalties for doing that.
Mhm.
So you could be talking, you could have a, I don't know, a bunch of councils, and 20% of them you're not allowed to contact. So
Mhm.
how do you contact them? Well, you try and email them, you try and phone them, and then you're back to, you're back to the same problem. So it's kind of circular problem. It's a diminishing pie. So I see LinkedIn as the only one of the very few ways of outreaching to those potential customers, where they are putting themselves out there on a platform. They want to be contacted. There's information out there, and then you can start to, in a softer way, perhaps kind of have some. I say in the book, to have some stepping stones towards that trust, up to
Mhm.
the point where you might have a phone call or a meeting. So I
Mhm.
see it's really important.
And well, I do want to ask you about the book, but something you said there about LinkedIn and building that trust. You're not selling, a widget. You're not selling a 50 quid thing. How have you found? How do you approach this from effectively? I know it's NHS and public sector, but it is the equivalence of an enterprise sale
Mm.
in that sense. How have you approached that from LinkedIn? Because some people would say the decision makers aren't there.
Oh no, they're all there. That so if you haven't, so it's almost like I say, it's the underpinning to that trust, to actually trust you enough to then have a phone call or have a meeting with you. So number one, quite a lot of the people are already on LinkedIn anyway, whether they use the platform regularly or not. They're there, so you have a
Mhm.
connection point with them. The other thing is they will check you out before they even think about talking to you. So if you haven't got a good profile, if you've got a profile picture, if you've not updated, if you haven't posted in the last 10 years or something like that, what have they got to go on? That doesn't help them build that trust. So if
Mhm.
you've got a good profile, it says exactly what you do. You're in conversation with people about what you do, and you're interested in what you do, and you do that in the right way. And thanks to Maverick, I'm now doing that in the right way. Um, it's far more, that it's more substantive when you
Mhm.
get that, when you make that call and you say, when you make that call on the email and you say, can we have a phone call? Can we have a meeting? They're much more likely to say yes. So the decision makers are definitely there. 100%, they're
Mhm.
definitely there. So anybody who says they're not, they are.
Right. Cool. And thanks for the promo there.
No problem.
um, um, but you also gave us an honourable mention in your book, and just walk me through. Tell me a bit about the book so people can understand what it is, and also what compelled you to write it.
So what compelled me to write it? Well, yeah, that's a good question. Well, I was in the middle of COVID, so I was massively bored. That was
Mhm.
the first thing. So I didn't know what to do with myself in the evenings and the weekends. So I was, kicking around the house, trying not to upset my wife and my son, which worked, thankfully. Again, that training thing, it just kind of kept eating away at me. I've had the benefit of IBM training, Unisys training, residential training schools and that sort of thing. It really, it set me up in my formative years as a salesperson. And today you've got younger salespeople talking to me saying, how'd you do this? How'd you do that? How'd you segment the market? What do you mean segment the market? What do you mean have a territory planning meeting with a partner? What do you mean? What do you do in those meetings? And I'm thinking, this just is not fair. So I basically wrote the book to my sort of 25, 24-year-old self when I was in my first 5 years of selling. And I wish I'd had this book myself, because I would have saved myself a load of pitfalls. But the people that the book's aimed at, I think it's aimed fairly and squarely at the new sellers in
Mhm.
enterprise sales or corporate sales. Anybody that's not selling to the general public, so B2B really. And they're in their first role. They managed to get their first role, and people come into these roles from selling cars, from selling ice cream, selling anything. Right, in their
Mhm.
first role, it's a real do or die kind of thing. Are you going to make it or not? And it's really the basics of how you kind of construct that, how you conduct yourself in a large organization, how you work with other parts of the organization to get your, I call it, your unfair share of the pie, of the help really. The second person it's aimed at is the entrepreneur. So
Mhm.
somebody like you that's built something, and you then need to go and, it might be a widget, it might be a piece of software, it might be an app, and you need to go and sell it to a corporate. Well, you're a builder, you're not a seller. So two things there. One, you might have to go and do it yourself, or you might have to hire somebody to go and do it. And what's a real expectation of them, of you, and you of them over a period of time? So you get to know the basics without having to be a salesperson, really. And the
Mhm.
third person it's aimed at is sort of a management graduate, or and they come out of business school and they're fully suited, and they go and work for a large consulting firm, and they say, great, who am I going to consult with now? And they say, oh no, you've got to sell it first. And then the color drains and the dramatic music starts, and they think, I've been to business school to become second-hand car dealer. Oh no, where do I start? So in a weekend you can probably, with the book, you can probably get, you can be dangerous over a weekend. You can get the basics, you can get the language, and you sort of know what to do.
And you're right there. Most people just learn on the job and copy what seems to be working for other people.
Mm. Yeah, and there's
Um,
nothing wrong with that. I think you should model success, absolutely, but that takes a long time.
mhm.
Distilling it, and that's long, and that might not be your skill. Distilling that really complicated thing that person's doing, and make it something you can do, and you understand the ABCs of it. So that's what the book does. It tries to break that kind of complex issue down into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and just follow that, and then you'll the flywheel will pick up speed.
So in that kind of early stage of selling, there's an element of an emotional roller coaster, because you're doing things that, let's be honest, when you first get going, fail more than they succeed, at
Yeah,
least at the
yeah,
beginning. How
yeah.
do you, at what point do you toughen up to that?
I think the point where you get some sort of success, and you realize that this isn't a glass wall, and that you can get a little bit of purchase on it if you do the right things and you do enough of it. Now, I talk about failure in the book actually towards the end, and I welcome failure now, because I've had the success and I continue to have the success. But sometimes you have long periods of time where you're in the desert and you're just not closing anything, can't close a barn door, and it's down to, are you working for the right organizations, and are you doing the right things? And also dealing with leadership and making sure they know you're doing the right things, and you say what you do and you do what you say, and you're very transparent about what you're doing. That makes leadership very comfortable with you. But you're right. I mean, it's just tough, and many people have different ways of dealing with it. I mean, I'm sure we all know salespeople. Some people do the right things and they help promote themselves, and they look at different ways of doing things. I look at different ways of doing things, which is how I came across Maverick in the first place. But I think it's just a resilience thing. There's quite a few good books out there on resilience, and I
Mm,
welcome failure, because we learn nothing from our successes. We learn everything from our failures. So I kind of, in a sort of way, in a weird sort of way, I kind of welcome success so I can dissect it, and where did we go wrong. Even when we do a great deal, I look at it, and there's a great book by Ben Hunt Davis called "Will It Make the Boat Go Faster?" And he talks about that in his book, where he talks about winning a gold medal at the Sydney Olympics. Even then, after winning, you're the best in the world at that point. They dissected it and said, "How could we have done better?" I mean, goodness me, you've won a gold medal,
mhm,
but you take performance away from the result, right?
mhm.
So that's kind of what I would say to that.
Really, so I want to kind of ask you the same question in a different way. So we talked about how sales has changed. How do you think the skill set of a salesperson has changed in terms of what you need? And I'll give you a reason why I'm asking this. Um, I think we've gone through a shift in the way. Let me say my piece, and then you can give your take on what I say. And this is unscripted, so disagree with it if you want. I see we've gone from, if we think 70s, 80s, 90s, there was an element of, there was some salespeople, it was all relationship and who you know, and just hit the phones and kind of just aggressive, repetitive behavior to get the numbers.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it was about how good you were as a people person back then.
Yep. Hmm.
But now I think we've gone through a phase of that. And I think we're going into another phase where it's like, how good are you as a digital people person, which is really different, because if you've been used to doing the phone, you've got some tonality to judge where they're at.
Yeah.
You've got, body language if you're in person. But if you want to get leads from, prospects from your desk, you have to be good at reading digital vibes. And
Hmm.
I'm not so sure that that's a skill that's easily picked up for somebody who's been doing that. It's quite a tough transition, I think. I could be
Yeah.
wrong. What do you think?
I mean, I do agree with some of that, yeah. And you're right. You are right. There's a different skill, but you need to add to the existing skill of being that people person, because the
Yeah,
goal of all this is to get to a face-to-face meeting. So you
yeah,
still need that. I need to know how to behave with people in person. So it's a much more diverse skill set now that you need to
mhm,
have. It's not only that, you need to have this digital piece in the front of that, because you're
yeah,
right, you don't get that interaction.
mm,
And I think that writing copy, even if it's like one line, 6 words, something like that, writing that copy, you could I could spend an hour thinking about how on earth I'm going to, in a very short line that this person will then read, because they're not going to read a diatribe, they're not going to read
mm,
like a tome. They'll read a couple of lines and they'll decide, yeah, I want to talk to this person or I don't. So those copywriting, that's the skill really there.
mm,
And also, as you say, trying to read into what they're sending back to you, if they do send something back, is, and how long is too long to leave it before you go back to them if they don't reply. It's all, and I don't think we've got that skill in abundance. And you're right, the older people like me, that's a new skill for them to learn, definitely. The younger guys, they're going to have that piece, but they're not going to have that other piece at the end, which is the face-to-face skills. So
mm,
it's there is sort of yeah, multifaceted, and I think it's got harder, really.
mm. I was saying to somebody, it's almost like you need an element or a smidgen of marketing skills in there now.
Oh yeah, oh absolutely. You need to be aware of the basic principles of marketing. Your marketing department, if it's a large company, should be helping you with that, and some responsibility does lie with them, because they're interested in making leads happen, and making inbounds happen and making your life easier. That's the kind of the job of field marketing anyway. But yeah, just as you say, it's a marketing skill as
Mm.
much as a sales skill now.
So you also have another interesting thing that you do outside
Yes.
of Salesforce.
I do, yes. Um, it's a bit of a sort of sad story, really. My wife was ill. She got cancer about 10 years ago, and thankfully she's okay now. But she said to me, "You need to go and find a hobby." I said, "Well, I cycle, I run." She went, "No, something that really engages your brain for a long period of time." So, a friend of a friend introduced me to a guy that made knives for a living. He made, bushcraft and hunting knives. I thought, that's interesting. Okay. And we went round and we hit it off. And he said, "Do you want to learn how to do this?" And I said, "Well, yeah, okay, that'd be interesting." So every Tuesday night, I used to go up to his house, and he eventually started making knives for Ray Mears. So
Wow.
he's quite a famous knife maker. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2016, and I sort of did nothing with the idea. And then I met up with a guy who's now my business partner in 2020, and we started Salient Knives. So
Salient knives.
yeah, Salient Knives, and it's handmade and even hand engraved knives for the field sports market, for the hunting and shooting market. So we've got reseller in the States, we've got people in Norway buying them, and yeah, it's really interesting actually. But it's a bit of an odd thing. But yeah, that's kind of encompassing all of my skills, and I'm using Maverick skills there as well, funnily enough. So it's it's very transferable, I would say.
Yeah, I know. It's and the attention to detail. I mean, I'm a bit of sado, and I spend too much time on TikTok and YouTube watching people make things.
Yeah.
And I'm actually fascinated by almost like there's these skills that we used to have that we no longer seem to have like widely. People who can make things like my grandparents would make things, and it's like we don't even do that anymore. But
Yeah.
when you showed me some of the knives you've made with the detailing on them and everything, it's like you got to spend hours. That's like a labor of love on each knife, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the engraving alone, the engraving is done by a hand engraver that used to work for Purdy shotguns, and he takes 2 days just to engrave two sides of the knife. And the handles take 4 days to hand checker and get to that kind of really smooth, polished oil finish. And the knife itself probably takes another day and a half to 2 days to make. So really, you're not paying for the raw materials;
Mm,
you're paying for that person's time, but also the skill it took to learn that skill to be able to do
mm,
it in that shorter time, if you like. So
yeah.
yeah, that's one of the reasons that I like doing it, because with my corporate job, I don't actually make anything, anything
Mm.
physical. So this kind of spoke to me, and I agree. It's a dying art, and yeah, I just love it. I think it's great. It's really therapeutic actually, because it's dull sometimes, and you're just sanding away, and your mind wanders, and I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I think you know, I think one of the things about work today, you know, if we look back, I keep saying 40, like 20 years ago, but 20 years ago, it wasn't 20 years ago. You know, people keep saying, I keep seeing these videos about, do you realize 20 years ago was 2002? And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
I always, in my head, I think 20 years ago was like 1980 or something.
Me too. Yeah.
Um, but we have a work life now that's very mental driven, or you know, thought driven versus labor driven, you know, where the sweat of your brow and all that kind of stuff. And I think it creates, you know, 20 years ago, it was like, okay, you've hurt your back, you can't work anymore. We're now seeing more people where it's like, actually, I'm burnt out mentally, I can't think properly, I'm exhausted. How do you I know you do the knives, but in a sales environment where you've got targets to hit and all that kind of stuff, that can be quite a big pressure on somebody, especially if it's, you know, tough economic circumstances. Have you ever helped anybody or talked about this in terms of how do you balance that pressure, that you need a healthy level of pressure to perform, but too much pressure can actually make somebody ill, basically?
Absolutely. You know, partly my wife's illness, you know, I don't mind talking about this because, you know, I think it helps if people talk about it. But part of my wife's illness, and you know, she recovered from that, but there was a chance she wouldn't. And partly because of the pressure of the job and just the pressure of life these days. Life is just moving so fast. You know, certainly for people like ourselves that have lived through the 80s and things like that, you know, it's much more information you have to take in, even on a personal level. And you know, I've struggled with mental health. I struggle with anxiety. But I would say there's a few things you can do to look after yourself. One is to talk about it, okay, friends, and then go and seek professional help. There's so many places now, and so many companies are providing that. And actually, it absolutely helps. It helps me to talk about it. Second thing is, have two phones, right? So my work phone is a work phone, and it stays on my desk at night, and it stays on my desk when I go on holiday. I actually pay for a personal phone, you know, that I take with me on holiday, and my friends and family can get hold of me. That's great. And then I have a work phone that goes off, just like your PC goes off. Because if you're constantly, you need to sort of be able to disengage and be able to have a personal life, and go and do things that you enjoy with your family and your friends, and do sports and watch TV and do whatever you want to do. If you're constantly looking at that phone going, I wonder what that's happening. I wonder what's happening there. You don't disengage. And I think that's a really important thing to do. Disengage and find out what you like and go do that as a almost like as a regiment. You
Mhm.
know, be good to yourself is all I
Yeah.
would say. And you're right, it's all above the neck stuff. It's not sweat of your brow. And I think we are in the West, we are guilty of burning people out because we're treating above the network like physical work, and it's just not like that. It's very much more subtle, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, and it is, you know, there's something like, if you've done a, you know, a 12-hour or 10-hour or 8-hour shift, you know, lifting stuff, moving stuff, expending energy, there is something therapeutic about coming home at the end of the day. But
Um,
actually, I find when I go home, it takes me an hour or so to get my head clear of what's happened in the day.
yeah, yeah. And I don't know about you, but when I go on holiday, it takes me at least a day and a half to
Yeah,
wind down. I'm not fully wound down for a good day and a half.
yeah.
You know, I'm still thinking about work. I'm still, all right, well, I've got to do that when I get back. You know, and you just need to. Another thing that's really helped me, which makes me sound a little bit woo woo, less so these days, is meditation. You know, it's dynamic rest for your brain, and it
Mm,
really really helps. I mean, it's mad how it does help because all you're doing is sitting in silence with your eyes closed for 20 minutes. But you do that, and I can't tell you the difference it makes. It's
mm.
really very very powerful, very powerful.
So, Mark, where can people check out your book?
So you can type my name if you type it in correctly, Marcengall. If you type it in correctly into Amazon, you can get the book there. You can get the audio book there as well. It's on Audible, and you can also get it on Apple as well. So if you've got Apple and you prefer that as a platform, it's there too. So you
Bro,
can buy it paperback on Amazon and also Kindle. And as I say, the Audible's there too.
did you do the audio yourself?
I didn't. Like most people, I can't stand the sound of my own voice. So I've got some voice talent, great voice talent. It's great because I can't explain it too much, but it sounds like he's telling you a secret. So it's
Mm.
really engaging. I love it. It's really good.
Yeah, no, I love the voices where it's like, welcome to Audible. Do you know what I mean? I can't do it, and it's like,
Yeah, I wish I could, but no, I hate the sound of my own voice.
yeah. Marc, you've been a superstar. Thanks for coming on. I'll pay you later for the little mentions of Maverick, so thank you so much for that. Guys, go check out Marc. We'll put his link to Amazon, the book, on there. We'll also put his LinkedIn details wherever you're watching or listening. We'll put that there as well, so that you can connect with Marc. You can grill him on what's in the book, and you can say he held up really well, given it this was totally unscripted and he had no idea what I was going to say. So, Marc, thank you for agreeing to this.
No problem, Dean. You're very welcome. Enjoyed it.
I don't know whether it was good for your career or not, but
We'll see.
cool. Thanks, Marc.
No problem. Thanks, Dean.